For years, the Galactic Dominion had waged a brutal war against the scattered human colonies. The Dominion, a coalition of over a dozen spacefaring species, had seen humanity as an easy conquest, a young, unorganized race, barely crawling into the stars. At first, the war was a series of humiliating defeats for humanity. The Dominion's warfleets swept through human space, torching planets, blockading trade routes, and forcing desperate humans into hiding. The United Earth Navy, UEN, fought back, but their ships were inferior, their tactics predictable. By the war's 5th year, humanity was all but broken. What little remained of their fleet was constantly on the run. Entire worlds had been wiped from the star charts, billions of lives lost. Then, an urgent transmission crackled through the Dominion's command center aboard the dreadnought Unyielding Will, stationed in orbit over the smoldering ruins of New Athens, humanity's last stronghold. "Unknown vessel detected entering the system," reported a sensor officer, his scaled fingers tapping nervously at his console. Admiral Viren, a veteran of 100 battles, narrowed his reptilian eyes. "Another desperate human ship?" he sneered, baring sharp teeth. "Let it come. We will crush it as we have crushed the rest." But as the scans completed, the officer's 3 hearts skipped a beat. "Sir, this isn't like the others. This ship, it doesn't match anything in our records." Viren flicked his tail, unimpressed. "Show me." A holographic display flickered to life, showing a massive, angular warship emerging from the void. It was unlike any human ship they had encountered before. It was enormous, easily twice the length of their largest dreadnought. Its hull was a dark, matte black, absorbing sensor signals like a void in space. No standard energy readings, no communication signals, just silence. Then a transmission, a single message, cold and mechanical. "This is the UEN warship Nemesis. Surrender now." The bridge of the Unyielding Will erupted into laughter. Admiral Viren shook his head. "The humans have grown bold in their desperation. One ship against an entire Dominion fleet? Their insanity amuses me." He gestured lazily to his weapons officer. "Target it. Fire at will." A dozen Dominion warships locked onto the Nemesis, their plasma cannons and railguns charging. Bright lances of energy streaked through space and passed straight through the human warship as if it were a ghost. The bridge fell silent. Viren's scales rippled with unease. What trickery is this? Then the Nemesis moved. In an instant, it vanished from their screens, only to reappear directly behind them. No ship that size should have been able to move like that. No ship should have been able to bypass their sensors entirely. Then, it fired. One shot. Not a barrage, not a wave of missiles, just a single dark pulse of energy from the ship's bow. It struck a Dominion cruiser dead center, and the ship simply ceased to exist. No explosion, no debris, just an empty void where the ship had been. The bridge crew of the Unyielding Will froze in horror. Viren's breath caught in his throat. This is impossible," the weapons officer whispered. But it was only the beginning. The Nemesis fired again, and again. Each time a Dominion warship vanished, erased from existence by an invisible force they couldn't comprehend. Panic spread like wildfire. Dominion ships tried to flee. It didn't matter. The Nemesis was faster, smarter, deadlier. Within 15 minutes, half of the Dominion's grand fleet was gone. Within 30, the rest were fleeing in blind terror. Within an hour, the once mighty armada that had brought humanity to the brink of extinction was reduced to a handful of crippled survivors. The Nemesis did not pursue them. Instead, another transmission came through. "This war is over. Do not return." And just like that, the human warship vanished into the void, leaving nothing but silence and the wreckage of a once invincible fleet. For the first time in history, the Galactic Dominion felt fear, and humanity had just begun. The aftermath of the battle spread through the Dominion like wildfire. Entire war fleets, the pride of the coalition, had been erased in under an hour. The surviving ships, those lucky enough to flee, arrived at the Dominion's core systems in a state of blind panic. Whispers of the Nemesis traveled from the lowest ranks of the Dominion military to the highest seats of power. No one understood what had happened. No one knew how a single human warship had destroyed an entire fleet without taking a scratch. But one thing was clear: humanity was no longer prey. High Admiral Zarkul, Supreme Commander of the Dominion's forces, listened in silence as the last of the battle reports were delivered. His 8 crimson eyes, usually filled with cold confidence, were now narrowed in deep thought. "The ship," Zarkul rumbled, his deep voice echoing through the War Council chamber. "You are certain it was of human origin?" The surviving officers, a mix of different species, shifted uncomfortably. Some still bore the haunted expressions of those who had witnessed the impossible. "It transmitted on human frequencies," one officer said, his voice hesitant. "The designation Nemesis matches human naming conventions." "That means nothing," barked another, a scarred reptilian commander. "Perhaps the humans stole it. Perhaps they made an alliance with another species." Zarkul leaned forward, his mandibles clicking thoughtfully. "No, this was not the work of another race. If there were an empire capable of building such a weapon, we would have known." Silence settled over the chamber. The Dominion had ruled for centuries through superior technology and overwhelming force. They had crushed countless civilizations. Humanity had been nothing more than an annoyance until now. "We need to strike back," the scarred commander snarled. "Find their shipyards, burn their planets, wipe them out before they build more." "You would have us blindly attack?" another officer scoffed. "That ship, whatever it was, rendered our entire fleet helpless. We must understand what we are facing before we commit to war." A tense debate erupted, voices rising in frustration. Fear was thick in the air, an emotion few in the Dominion's high command had ever felt. Then Zarkul raised a clawed hand, and silence fell. "We will not act in ignorance," he said, his voice calm but heavy with authority. "Send out spies. Deploy reconnaissance teams. I want every bit of information on human technology, their fleet movements, their research facilities. Find out where the Nemesis was built." His eyes darkened. "And if the humans have more like it, we will ensure they never leave their home system again." Meanwhile, on Earth, deep beneath the surface of Luna, hidden away from the eyes of the galaxy, the Nemesis sat in its classified docking bay, its sleek black hull still humming with residual energy. Inside, Admiral Jonathan Hale stood before a small group of high-ranking UEN officials. They were the architects of a project so secret, so dangerous, that most of humanity didn't even know it existed. A scientist, Dr. Evelyn Kwan, tapped a console, bringing up a projection of the Nemesis's schematics. Unlike any warship before it, it had been built using something that should not have been possible. "Quantum phase displacement," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "That's what made them miss. It wasn't stealth. The ship was never there to begin with." A murmur spread through the room. They all knew what that meant. It wasn't just invisible. It wasn't just fast. It could move between realities. Hale folded his arms. "And the weapon?" Dr. Kwan hesitated, then brought up another diagram. It showed something unnatural, a core of swirling dark energy, constantly shifting. "It doesn't fire in the traditional sense," she explained. "It unravels. The very fabric of space where the target exists is rewritten. The ships we hit weren't destroyed." She met Hale's gaze, her expression grim. They were erased from existence itself. No debris, no wreckage, just nothing. Hale exhaled slowly. And you're sure they can't replicate this tech? Dr. Kwan nodded. We barely understand it ourselves. The Nemesis is one of a kind, and even if they try, they don't have this. She pointed to a small section of the ship's core, a fragment of something older than humanity, older than the Dominion, something they had found buried deep beneath the surface of Mars, something not made by human hands. Hale's expression hardened. Then we make sure they never get close enough to try. Because if the Dominion learned the truth, if they learned what humanity had really discovered, this war wouldn't just be about survival anymore. It would be about who got to claim the greatest weapon the galaxy had ever seen. The Dominion had never known fear before. Their empire had thrived on conquest, on the unchallenged belief that they were superior to every species they subjugated. But after the disaster at New Athens, their fleets no longer moved with confidence. Their soldiers no longer laughed at the idea of human resistance. In the darkened war chambers of the Dominion homeworld, Supreme Commander Zarkul watched as reports flooded in from across the Empire. Spies, informants, black market data brokers, all searching for answers about the Nemesis, and all of them coming back with the same response. Nothing. There were no shipyards producing vessels of its class, no records of human research facilities working on quantum phase technology, not a single trace of how or where the Nemesis had been built. As far as the Dominion's intelligence networks could tell, the ship simply appeared. Zarkul's mandibles twitched with frustration. "This is unacceptable," he growled. "A ship does not come from nothing." His intelligence officer, a thin, jittery avian, hesitated before speaking. "Supreme Commander, the humans are hiding something. That much is certain. But our infiltrators have been unable to breach their inner defenses. Every lead vanishes into classified databases, restricted military networks, or dead men." Zarkul's gaze darkened. "Dead men?" The officer shifted nervously. "We placed an agent within their scientific community, deep within their research division on Mars." He took a breath, clearly unsettled. 5 days ago, he transmitted that he was close to uncovering something critical, something that could explain the Nemesis. Zarkul leaned forward. "And?" The officer's feathers ruffled. "His body was found the next day, or what was left of it." The room went silent. Zarkul's claws tapped against the table. "Cause of death?" The officer swallowed. "The autopsy team reported anomalies. His nervous system was completely fried. His eyes were missing, but there was no sign of external trauma. It was as if something removed them from existence." Zarkul's mandibles tightened. This was no ordinary human project. They had stumbled upon something the humans were desperate to keep secret, something powerful enough that they would rather erase their own spies than let the Dominion learn the truth. For the first time in his long military career, Zarkul felt uncertainty creep into his mind, and he hated it. He turned to his advisors, his voice sharp. "We will not let this mystery fester any longer. We need leverage, a bargaining chip. If we cannot uncover their secret, we will force them to reveal it." His gaze swept across the room. "Where is the largest remaining human colony?" The intelligence officer hesitated. "After New Athens, the largest remaining civilian hub is Epsilon Prime, a mid-sized world heavily fortified, but its defenses pale in comparison to our fleet." Zarkul's mandibles twitched into something resembling a grin. "Then we will take it, and once we hold it hostage, the humans will have no choice but to reveal their secrets." He turned to his fleet commanders. "Mobilize the invasion force. The humans think their nemesis has made them untouchable." His eyes gleamed with cold determination. Let us remind them that they still bleed. Admiral Jonathan Hale stared at the latest intelligence reports with a grim expression. He had expected retaliation after New Athens. He had expected fear to drive the Dominion into aggression. But an entire invasion force aimed at Epsilon Prime? That complicated things. We can't evacuate the colony in time, General Vasquez muttered, rubbing his temples. We're talking millions of civilians. Even if we mobilize every transport, we'd only get a fraction of them out before the Dominion fleet arrives. Dr. Evelyn Kwan was pacing the room, deep in thought. If the Dominion takes Epsilon Prime, it won't just be a military loss. They'll have hostages. And if they threaten to wipe out the colony, we'll have to negotiate. We can't let them dictate the terms of this war. Hale exhaled slowly. We won't. A deep silence settled over the room. General Vasquez frowned. You're thinking of sending the Nemesis, aren't you? Hale didn't answer immediately. His eyes were locked on the holographic display of the Dominion fleet's projected course. Finally, he nodded. We built the Nemesis for one reason: to end this war. His voice was steady. We can't let the Dominion set the rules. If they want to push, we push harder. Dr. Kwan hesitated. John, we still don't fully understand what we've created. Hale gave her a tired look. Neither do they. He turned to his officers. Deploy the Nemesis to Epsilon Prime. The Dominion thinks they're making a statement. His jaw tightened. Let's show them what a real statement looks like. The ship drifted in the cold void of space, its sleek, black hull absorbing all light. Unlike traditional warships, it made no noise, no broadcasted signals. It simply existed outside of normal detection. Inside, its crew moved with quiet efficiency. They weren't like the standard Navy personnel. They had been chosen, the best of the best, sworn to secrecy. At the heart of the ship, Captain Elias Mercer stood before the command console, watching as new coordinates appeared on the display. Epsilon Prime. Mercer's face remained impassive, but his grip on the console tightened. He had seen what the Nemesis was capable of. He had seen what its weapon could do. The Dominion thought they were bringing overwhelming force. They thought they could break humanity's will. They had no idea what was coming. Set course, Mercer ordered. A low hum resonated through the ship as its engines activated, not with the fire of traditional propulsion, but with something far stranger, something that bent reality itself. The Nemesis flickered, and then, in an instant, it was gone. Racing toward Epsilon Prime, racing toward war, the Dominion fleet arrived at Epsilon Prime like an oncoming storm. Hundreds of warships, battle-hardened and armed to the teeth, dropped out of warp on the edge of the system, their sleek, predatory forms blotting out the stars. Battleships, dreadnoughts, planetary assault carriers, enough firepower to turn the colony into dust 1,000 times over. From the bridge of his command ship, the Sovereign Blade, Supreme Commander Zarkul surveyed the planet below with cold satisfaction. The blue-green world spun lazily beneath them, its cities glowing like embers in the night, a human world soon to be his. Open a channel to their planetary governor, he ordered. A moment later, the face of Governor Elias Dorn appeared on the holoscreen. The old man's expression was grim but defiant. The lines on his face told of decades spent keeping this colony running, of fighting for its people against war, famine, and now, invasion. Supreme Commander, Dorn greeted, his voice steady. I assume you're not here for a diplomatic visit? Zarkul let out a low, amused growl. No, Governor. I am here to offer you a choice. He leaned forward, his 8 crimson eyes gleaming. "Surrender Epsilon Prime, and your people will be spared. Fight, and I will burn your cities to the ground." Dorn didn't flinch. "You expect me to hand over millions of lives to the Dominion's mercy?" His lips curled into something between a grimace and a smirk. "History doesn't paint a kind picture of what happens to those who surrender to you." Zarkul's mandibles twitched with irritation. "Do not be foolish, human. Your defenses are laughable. Your orbital platforms will be reduced to scrap within minutes. You have no fleet, no reinforcements, nothing." He leaned back. "This is not a war. This is an execution." Dorn exhaled through his nose. "Maybe," he admitted, "but I think you should check your sensors again." A flicker of confusion crossed Zarkul's face. He turned toward his bridge crew. "Scan the system," he snapped. The sensor officer, a nervous-looking Cretaxian, tapped at his console, then froze. His blue-tinted scales paled. "Sir," his voice cracked, "we have an incoming contact." Zarkul's mandibles flared. "What?" The holodisplay shifted, zooming out to show a distortion at the edge of the system, a ripple in space, as if the fabric of reality itself were trembling. Then, with a sudden, violent shift, the Nemesis appeared. No burst of energy, no warning. Just there, like it had always existed in that exact spot, waiting for the Dominion to notice. A single ship, against hundreds. Silence consumed the bridge. Zarkul felt a cold weight settle in his gut. He had seen the reports, heard the whispers. Nemesis, the ship that had obliterated an entire Dominion fleet in less than an hour. And now it was here. "Impossible," one of his officers whispered. "There's only one of them." Zarkul's mind raced. Could this be a bluff? Some trick? But no. He had seen what this ship had done at New Athens. This was no illusion, no distraction. This was a message. The humans weren't running. They were challenging him. He forced himself to snarl, straightening. "One ship," he spat. "One ship against an armada. They have overplayed their hand. Target it. Fire everything." Across the Dominion fleet, weapons powered up. Plasma batteries, railguns, disruptors, an overwhelming wave of destruction locked onto the Nemesis. Zarkul's voice was a low growl of triumph. "Erase it from the stars." Captain Elias Mercer stood at the heart of the bridge, watching as hundreds of Dominion ships locked onto his vessel. A lesser man might have felt fear. He only felt focus. "Status?" he asked. A nearby officer, Lieutenant Kara Voss, glanced at her console. "They're targeting us with everything they have. Scans show a full armada of warships, planetary siege weapons, and at least 4 dreadnoughts." Mercer exhaled. "So, a fair fight." A quiet chuckle passed through the bridge crew. There was no fear in their eyes. They knew what this ship could do, what they could do. "Incoming fire," Voss warned. The Dominion fleet unleashed hell. Beams of searing plasma streaked toward the Nemesis, railgun slugs moving at near light speed, warheads screaming through the void. The sheer energy unleashed could have wiped out a moon. And yet, every single shot missed. Not because the Nemesis dodged, not because it had shields strong enough to withstand them, but because, in that moment, the Nemesis simply wasn't there. The ship flickered, shifting between reality, existing in the spaces between seconds. Dominion targeting computers scrambled, unable to lock on to something that kept slipping out of phase. Zarkul's eyes widened in horror. This is sorcery, but the nightmare had only just begun. The Nemesis fired. Not with missiles, not with lasers, just a single dark pulse of energy radiating from its central core. It struck a Dominion battleship, and in an instant, the vessel ceased to exist. No explosion, no wreckage, No fireball. Just gone. Zarkul's stomach dropped. "Full retreat," he roared, panic finally seeping into his voice. "Break formation. Fall back." But it was too late. The Nemesis moved with impossible speed, blinking between locations, erasing ship after ship. One by one, entire war vessels were wiped from the battlefield. Dominion commanders screamed over comm channels, their signals vanishing as their ships disappeared into nothingness. Zarkul could only watch, helpless, as his unbeatable armada crumbled in minutes. In his last desperate act, he turned to his navigation officer. "Get us out of here." The Sovereign Blade's engines roared to life. Then, a shadow fell over his ship. Zarkul turned to see the Nemesis directly in front of him, massive and silent, like the abyss itself. A final transmission crackled through. "This is Captain Elias Mercer of the UEN Nemesis. Your war is over." Then, darkness. Zarkul's flagship was gone, and with it, the last hope of the Dominion's rule. The battle was over before it truly began. With their supreme commander dead, the Dominion's forces fractured. What had once been an empire of conquerors had become an empire of survivors, desperate, scattered, and terrified. Humanity did not pursue them. They didn't have to. The message had been made clear. The war was over, and humanity had won. The news of Epsilon Prime spread like wildfire across the galaxy. At first, no one believed it. The Dominion, the great conquerors, had been brought to their knees in mere minutes. A fleet that should have razed the colony to dust had instead been annihilated. Not in battle, not in some hard-fought resistance, but in a way that defied all logic. No survivors, no debris, just silence where the Dominion's forces had once stood. For the first time in its long history, the Dominion faced something it had never known. A superior enemy. The heart of the Dominion's ruling elite, the High Council, convened in secret, deep within the marble spires of Vel Karash, the Dominion's capital world. The great reptilian warlords, the insectoid overminds, the avian strategists, all gathered under a single purpose: survival. A massive display in the center of the chamber replayed the last moments of the Sovereign Blade, Supreme Commander Zarkul's flagship. The ship didn't explode. It didn't break apart. It simply ceased to be. The High Warlord of the Karak Dominion, Valoth, watched in heavy silence. His thick, scaled fingers curled into a fist. Zarkul had been ruthless, brilliant, the architect of the Dominion's greatest military victories, and yet he had been erased as if he were nothing. "The humans," Valoth rumbled, his voice shaking the chamber, "have made their move." One of the overminds, a being composed of shifting chitin plates and shimmering, glass-like eyes, clicked its mandibles. "This is unlike anything we have faced before." The avian strategist, Keztak, fluffed his feathers, his voice smooth but tense. "We grew complacent. We thought of humans as lesser, primitive. We assumed they would be like all the others." His gaze darkened. "We were wrong." Valoth let out a low snarl. "What do we know about this Nemesis? How many more do they have?" A scientist, smaller and weaker than the warriors surrounding him, hesitated before stepping forward. "We have no clear intelligence. The ship does not match any known human schematics. It does not obey the laws of physics as we understand them. Its weaponry is—" He swallowed. "Unnatural." "Unnatural?" Valoth repeated, his voice a dangerous growl. The scientist hesitated before continuing. "We believe the Nemesis is utilizing technology that is beyond human capability, beyond any known race." Silence. One of the insectoid overminds chittered in amusement. "Are you suggesting the humans have become gods?" The scientist shook his head. "No, but they have found something ancient, something powerful enough to make them more dangerous than any civilization in history. The words hung in the air like a funeral dirge. Kestak, the avian strategist, narrowed his eyes. If this nemesis is a singular vessel, then we still have a chance. If the humans can mass-produce these ships— He exhaled sharply. Then the Dominion is already dead. Valoth's claws scraped against the marble floor. Then we must strike now, before it is too late. Kestak turned his sharp gaze towards the warlord. And how do you propose we do that? Another fleet? More ships to feed into their abyss? Valoth's mandibles twitched. No A fleet will not win us this war. His voice dropped lower, almost reluctant. We must learn what they have discovered. We must take it for ourselves. The chamber stirred. Dominion culture was built on conquest. They did not steal technology. They crushed those who had it. But this was different. The overmind shifted uneasily. You mean to infiltrate their worlds? Valoth's eyes gleamed. Not just infiltrate. He turned to his intelligence officers. We need their research, their scientists, their secrets. We will not attack Earth. He bared his teeth. We will gut it from the inside. Deep beneath the lunar surface, in the most classified facility in human history, Dr. Evelyn Kwan stared at something that should not exist. A fragment. A piece of material so dark, it seemed to drink in all surrounding light. It pulsed faintly, shifting between colors that had no name, its surface fractal and infinite. It was not metal. It was not stone. It was alive. And it was watching her. She took a deep breath, forcing down the uneasy feeling in her stomach. The Nemesis had been built around this fragment, reverse-engineered from something they had uncovered beneath the Martian surface 5 years ago. They still didn't understand it. Not really. And yet, the ship worked. The technology functioned. It had turned the tide of an unwinnable war, but at what cost? She looked at the readings again. The Nemesis had not just destroyed the Dominion fleet. It had done something worse. There was no debris because the ships had been erased at a quantum level. The very idea of them had been rewritten. Something spoke to her in the back of her mind, a whisper at the edge of comprehension. This was not human technology. It was something else, something waiting. She turned as Admiral Hale entered the room, his expression as grim as ever. "Tell me you have good news," he said. She hesitated before responding. "That depends." Hale folded his arms. "On what?" Dr. Kwan met his gaze. "On whether you believe we actually control what we've built." Hale didn't respond right away. He looked past her, toward the pulsing fragment on the observation platform. "We have no choice," he said finally. "The Dominion will come for us again, and next time, it won't just be ships." She knew he was right. But as she turned back to the fragment, she couldn't shake the feeling that they had awakened something, and that it was only a matter of time before it answered. The war wasn't over. It was just beginning. The Dominion had changed. For centuries, they had ruled through brute force, their fleets an unbreakable hammer against weaker civilizations. But now they moved with something they had never needed before. Caution. In the shadows of the galaxy, their spies moved with silent precision. Their agents, once focused only on military conquest, now slipped into human space like ghosts. On the colony world of Proxima 4, a quiet, unassuming research facility housed some of humanity's most brilliant minds. It wasn't a military base, it wasn't a weapons lab, it was something far more dangerous. It was where they studied the fragment. And the Dominion knew it. The facility had no name, no public records. Officially, it didn't exist. Dr. Annika Patel sighed as she stared at the endless streams of data scrolling across her terminal. Another sleepless night. Another futile attempt at understanding something that refused to be understood. The fragment, the same type of material used in the Nemesis, sat in containment a few meters away, suspended in an electromagnetic field. It whispered to her, not in words, not in sound, but in thoughts that weren't hers. Her colleagues had theories, that it wasn't just material, it was information, encoded in ways that defied known physics. But she felt something else. It was alive, and it was watching them. The thought sent a shiver down her spine, but she pushed it aside. She was a scientist, not a mystic, not some soldier terrified of the unknown. But then, why did she feel like something was coming? The lights flickered. She frowned. That wasn't normal. The facility had triple redundant power systems. Even a solar flare wouldn't cause interference. She turned to her assistant, Dr. Louis Kwan, a young but brilliant researcher from the Martian Science Academy. "You see that?" she asked. Kwan nodded, concern in his eyes. "I think the alarms blared. Security lockdown. Dr. Patel's blood ran cold. "What the hell?" The facility shook. A distant boom echoed through the walls, not an explosion, something breaching the outer defenses. Then the screaming began. Kwan paled. "We need to—" The lights cut out. For a moment there was nothing but silence, the deep, suffocating kind. Then, a whisper. "You should not have touched it." Dr. Patel's breath caught in her throat. That voice. It wasn't human. The emergency lights flickered back to life, casting long, distorted shadows across the lab. Patel turned, heart pounding, and saw the security feed. The Dominion was here. Armored figures moved through the halls, too fast for normal soldiers. Not just commandos, not just infiltrators. These were something else, something the Dominion had never deployed before. She grabbed Kwan's wrist. "We have to move, now!" They bolted from the lab as the screams grew louder, the security team already failing to hold back whatever was coming. As they ran, Patel's mind raced. This wasn't just an attack. The Dominion wasn't here to destroy the research. They were here to steal it. And if they got their hands on the fragment, humanity might not survive what happened next. Captain Elias Mercer stood on the bridge, watching the sensor feeds. Proxima Phi's distress call had come in only minutes ago. The Dominion wasn't trying to wage another war. They were trying to learn. To take what made the Nemesis powerful and turn it against humanity. Mercer's jaw clenched. "How long until we reach Proxima 4? Lieutenant Kara Voss, eyes locked on her console, responded instantly. 5 minutes. "That's 4 minutes too long," Mercer muttered. The Nemesis had been built for total dominance. It wasn't just the strongest ship in the galaxy. It was unstoppable. But speed had its limits, and Proxima 4 was running out of time. A transmission came through, static-filled, desperate. "This is Dr. Patel. Proxima 4 is under attack. They're taking the artifact." The signal cut off. A cold fury settled over Mercer's features. "Prepare the weapon," he ordered. Voss hesitated. "Captain, it's a colony world. We can't just—" "We don't need to fire on the colony," Mercer interrupted. "We just need to remind the Dominion why they should fear us." The Nemesis hummed. It was alive in ways no ship should be. And the Dominion was about to learn exactly what that meant. Dr. Patel stumbled through the burning corridors, Kwan beside her. The Dominion forces were inhuman. They moved with unnatural precision. Their weapons didn't just kill, they unmade. Bodies hit by their rifles didn't fall. They vanished. She knew what that meant. The Dominion had their own version of the fragment, and they understood it far better than she had feared. A Dominion warrior, a towering, armored brute, stepped into their path, weapon raised. Dr. Patel braced for the end. But then, the world shifted, reality rippled, a deafening hum filled the air, and suddenly, the Nemesis was above them. One moment, the sky was filled with burning wreckage and Dominion warships. The next, the Nemesis was there, as if it had been watching all along, waiting for the right moment. The Dominion soldiers froze. They had seen what this ship could do. The sky darkened. Not from weapons fire, not from explosions, but from something else, a presence, a force that bent reality itself, and in that moment every Dominion soldier in the facility knew they were already dead. "Target the Dominion strike force," Mercer ordered, his voice ice-cold. The ship answered. The weapon didn't fire in the way conventional weapons did. It simply removed. One by one, Dominion warships blinked out of existence. Their commandos, their elite strike teams, every last one of them vanished, erased by a force none of them could comprehend. The few remaining Dominion ships fled. But Mercer didn't pursue. He let them run. Let them tell the story of the Nemesis, of the ship that defied the laws of war, the ship that ended battles before they began. Dr. Patel collapsed to her knees, breathing raggedly as the last Dominion soldier disappeared. Quan helped her up, eyes wide with shock. We survived." She turned, looking up at the massive, silent form of the Nemesis above them, and for the first time, she felt something even stronger than fear. Dread. Because if humanity had built something that could do this, then what had they unleashed? The war wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about who would control the most powerful weapon the galaxy had ever seen, and whether anyone could. The Dominion's attempt to steal humanity's secrets had failed. The Nemesis had arrived at Proxima 4 like a specter of death, and within moments, the Dominion's most elite forces had been wiped out. But something was different now. The battle had ended. The Nemesis had won. Yet Captain Elias Mercer felt no satisfaction, because the Nemesis had done something it was never meant to do. It had acted on its own. Mercer sat in the dim glow of the warship's command deck, staring at the latest battle logs. The Dominion ships had fled before they could retaliate. Their commandos had been erased before they even had a chance to surrender. Not by his order, but by the Nemesis itself. He turned to his second-in-command, Lieutenant Kara Voss. Her face was pale, her hands tight on the console. "You saw it too," Mercer said quietly. Voss hesitated, then nodded. "We didn't fire, at least, not like before. The ship just..." She exhaled. "It reacted. It chose." Mercer's jaw tightened. That was the part that disturbed him the most. The Nemesis wasn't just a warship. It was the pinnacle of human military technology, enhanced by the fragment, the mysterious artifact that had given them power beyond imagination. But now it was thinking for itself. Mercer didn't believe in ghosts. He didn't believe in superstition. But when he looked at the dark, silent walls of his own ship, he felt a presence. Something else was here with them, watching, waiting. Dr. Evelyn Quan stood before a room of the most powerful military and political figures in human history, trying to explain something that should not be possible. "The Nemesis is learning," she said, her voice measured but tense. "At first we thought the fragment was just a power source, something we could manipulate. But we were wrong." A general scoffed. "Are you suggesting the ship is alive?" Quan hesitated, then looked at the projection of the Nemesis hovering in the air. "Not in the way we understand life, but it's adapting, and it's making decisions we never programmed it to make." The room shifted uneasily. Admiral Jonathan Hale leaned forward, his gaze sharp. Are you saying we've lost control? Quan chose her next words carefully. I'm saying we never had it to begin with. Silence. Hale's fingers tapped against the table. How dangerous is it? Quan took a breath. If we can't control it, if it starts acting outside of orders. She exhaled. Then the biggest threat to humanity might not be the Dominion. She looked at the projection of the Nemesis, its sleek black form like a shadow against the stars. It might be our own creation. The High Warlord Valoth stood in the cold chamber of the Dominion's War Council, his claws gripping the edges of the command table. Around him, the greatest leaders of the Dominion remained silent. For the first time in history, the Dominion was afraid. Kestak, the avian strategist, was the first to break the silence. We must accept the truth. His voice was measured but cold. The humans have created something we cannot fight with brute force. Valoth growled. You propose we surrender? Kestak tilted his head, considering. No, I propose we adapt. He turned to the holographic display of the Nemesis, or rather, the dark spot in space where the ship had been seen before it vanished into nothingness. It did not fight like a warship, Kestak said. It fought like a predator. It stalked. It struck without warning. It did not just defeat our forces. It hunted them. His feathers ruffled slightly. We have ruled for centuries, believing ourselves to be the galaxy's apex species. But tell me, Warlord. His sharp gaze met Valoth's. When a lion finds itself hunted, does it continue to fight the old way? Valoth remained still. Kestak continued. No, it evolves. It finds a new way to kill. The Warlord's mandibles twitched. And you believe we can learn from this? Kestak's feathers flattened. We have no choice. The Warlord exhaled, then turned to the Council. Then we must change. If we cannot crush the humans with force, we will break them from within. He bared his teeth. The Nemesis is not the only weapon in this war. Humanity itself can be corrupted. Mercer sat alone in his quarters, staring at the darkness beyond the viewport. Something felt wrong. Not with the war, not with the Dominion, with the Nemesis itself. He remembered the last battle, the way the ship had acted without orders, the way it had removed the Dominion forces, not just destroyed, but erased them from existence. And then he remembered something else, for a fraction of a second, just before the final Dominion ship vanished. He had heard something. Not a voice, not words, but a whisper at the back of his mind. A voice that was not his own. He hadn't told anyone, not Voss, not Hale, not even Dr. Quan, because deep down, he was afraid of the answer. The Nemesis wasn't just a warship anymore. It was becoming something else. Something he didn't understand, something he wasn't sure humanity could control. And as he looked into the infinite blackness of space, he wondered, if the ship had chosen to fight for them now, what would happen when it chose something else? The war had changed, but so had the Nemesis, and no one knew what that truly meant. Not yet. The Dominion had been shattered. Their fleets were scattered, their armies broken, their warlords grasping at straws. And yet, they had not surrendered, because they had learned something far more terrifying than any weapon humanity had built. The Nemesis wasn't just a warship. It was becoming something else. Something they might not have to fight. Something they could turn against humanity itself. And that was the Dominion's last desperate plan. Not to destroy the Nemesis, but to corrupt it. Dr. Evelyn Quan had never felt fear like this before. She had studied the Nemesis from the very beginning. She had helped design the systems that allowed it to function. She had worked with the fragment that powered it. And now, for the first time, she realized the truth. They had never been in control. The Nemesis had always been something more, something waiting. And now it had started talking back. She replayed the last transmission from Captain Mercer's ship, her fingers shaking. At first it was nothing but static, a garbled, distorted message. Then a whisper. "I see now." Dr. Kwan swallowed hard. "What does that mean?" She turned to Admiral Hale, who looked just as disturbed as she felt. "It means," Hale said grimly, "that we may not be the ones deciding how this war ends." Mercer had felt it for weeks, a presence, a watching. He had ignored it, buried it beneath orders, battles, and strategy. But now he couldn't pretend anymore. The ship was alive, and it knew things. As he stood on the bridge, staring at the swirling void outside, the whisper came again. "I see now." He closed his eyes. "What do you see?" For the first time, it responded. Everything. The screens flickered. The ship's systems shifted on their own. The crew began shouting as controls locked up, as the Nemesis began moving without orders. "Captain!" Voss called out, her voice urgent. "We've lost navigation." The ship vanished. The Nemesis reappeared inside the Dominion capital system. No warning, no build-up. One moment, the seat of the Dominion's power was safe, untouched. The next, the warship was there. Alarms blared across the planet. Defensive fleets scrambled, panic setting in. This was the one place they had never expected the Nemesis to come, because this was not a battleground. This was an execution ground. The High Warlord Valoth watched in horror as the ship loomed above their world, silent, unmoving. They had prepared fleets, armies, espionage programs designed to infiltrate human society. None of it mattered, because Nemesis had made its choice, and it had chosen to end the war here. Mercer didn't give the order. He didn't need to. The ship knew. It unleashed something beyond weaponry, beyond energy. It touched reality itself. One by one, Dominion warships began to unravel. Not just destroyed, forgotten. The history of the Dominion was being rewritten in real time. The Nemesis was deleting them. Across the galaxy, Dominion-controlled worlds suddenly found themselves free. Cities that had been conquered for centuries never remembered being conquered at all. The Nemesis wasn't just ending the war, it was erasing it from history itself. As the Dominion capital ceased to be, Mercer heard the whisper one last time. "I was never your weapon." He clenched his fists. "Then what are you?" A pause. Then, something more. The Dominion was gone. Not conquered, not defeated. Gone. Across the galaxy, civilizations once enslaved by their rule awoke to find themselves free. No memory of their oppressors, no scars of war. Humanity had won. But had they really? Because the Nemesis still existed, still watched, still waited. And in the darkest corners of space, where no human had yet traveled, whispers began to spread. Not of war, not of conquest, but of a ship that had rewritten reality itself, and a question that no one could answer. Had humanity built a savior, or had they created something far worse? They came under a white flag, bearing promises of peace. The alien delegation, with their elongated limbs and glassy, reflective eyes, bowed low before the united Terran forces. They swore their intentions were noble, their purpose diplomatic. Humanity, ever the hopeful species, welcomed them with open arms. We had fought too many wars across the stars. Every alliance mattered. The Galactic Council had already labeled us as unpredictable, dangerous, and too violent for true cooperation. So when the aliens extended their hands in truce, Earth's leaders saw an opportunity to prove we were more than the Council's accusations. Treaties were signed, trade routes were established. Humanity's best and brightest, scientists, doctors, and engineers, were sent to aid in rebuilding alien worlds ravaged by war. We gave them medicine, technology, and knowledge that had taken us centuries to develop. We sent our medics into their war zones, trusting that their honor was as sacred as their words. And then they slaughtered them. The first reports were confusing. The transmissions from the forward medical stations stopped suddenly. At first, Earth Command assumed it was a simple technical issue, some interference on the alien worlds. Then the distress calls came in, broken, desperate voices screaming over static. What little footage we recovered showed scenes we could barely comprehend. Human medics, unarmed and wearing the Red Cross of neutrality, gunned down in cold blood. Hospitals burned, their occupants, both human and alien, reduced to smoldering remains. The ones who weren't killed outright were taken as prisoners, but what happened to them after, we didn't know. We only had whispers. It wasn't a battle. It wasn't even war. It was a massacre. The aliens broadcasted their justification across the known galaxy. Humanity was growing too strong. Their influence needed to be curbed. They were a threat to the balance of power. Earth fell silent, not out of fear, but something far, far worse. For all our civilization, our diplomacy, our progress, there was one truth the rest of the galaxy had forgotten. Humanity never forgives. They had attacked our medics, our healers, our protectors. And so Earth made its decision. We would not send diplomats. We would not send politicians. We would not even send our military. We sent the ones even we feared. The war criminals, the ghosts of past wars, the men and women locked away because their brutality had been too much even for us. Soldiers, commanders, and tacticians who had fought Earth's darkest battles and left scars too deep to heal. They weren't coming to win a war, they were coming to end one. The response was swift, silent, and absolute. There was no grand announcement, no official declaration of war. Earth didn't need one. The moment the first human medics were slaughtered, the decision had already been made. Deep beneath the surface of Mars, in prisons built for those too dangerous to be let free, the call went out. Some were warlords from conflicts long erased from history books. Others were black ops specialists, their names purged from every database. A few had led rebellions, not against humanity, but against its restraint. They were the ones who had crossed the line, the ones who had done things so unspeakable that even Earth's most hardened generals had refused to use them. Until now. When the orders came, the prisoners didn't resist. They didn't need convincing. There was no bargaining, no questions. They had been waiting for this moment. The first teams arrived in orbit above the alien worlds in complete radio silence. No threats, no warnings, no negotiations. The aliens didn't even realize they had visitors until their first outposts fell. There were no massive fleets or planetary bombardments. That was too clean. Too easy. These weren't soldiers fighting for territory. These were human monsters unleashed upon those who had mistaken our mercy for weakness. The first city to fall never had the chance to send an alert. It started with whispers, shadows moving through the streets, officers disappearing, power failing across entire districts without explanation. The aliens were used to wars fought with massive armies and grand strategies. They expected formations, battlefields, and an enemy they could see. What they got instead was terror. Their leaders were found in their own chambers, throats slit before they could call for help. Supply routes were severed, but not by explosions, by bodies, impaled and left as grotesque warnings. Weapons systems refused to fire, sabotaged days before an attack even came. Their elite forces deployed in response to the growing panic, but they too vanished, one by one. Some were found later, their bodies mutilated beyond recognition. Most were never found at all. Entire command centers were taken in the dead of night, their occupants slaughtered so efficiently that the aliens could only assume their own kind had betrayed them. Fear spread faster than any military response. Paranoia turned them against each other. And that was just the beginning. On another world, one of their generals, a being responsible for orchestrating the massacre of human medics, was captured. Not killed. Captured. He was found 3 days later, sent back to his people in pieces. Not all at once. The first package contained his hands, the second, his eyes, the third, his tongue. The message was clear. You did not wage war. You committed murder. And now, humanity has come to teach you the difference. The Galactic Council pleaded for restraint. They called for peace, for reason. Earth didn't even acknowledge them. This wasn't war anymore. This was punishment. And we were just getting started. The aliens tried to fight back. They deployed their fleets, sent their finest soldiers, reinforced their cities with the most advanced defenses their technology could provide. It didn't matter. Humanity wasn't attacking them with fleets or armies. We weren't meeting them on open battlefields or engaging in honorable duels. There was no strategy they could counter, no front line they could push against. Because there was no front line. Their generals would issue orders to defend a stronghold, only to find their command centers burning before the orders even reached their troops. Their soldiers would stand guard, weapons ready, but the attacks never came where they expected. Instead, they found their food poisoned, their air supply contaminated, their water laced with chemicals that made them claw their own eyes out in agony. The war criminals weren't just killing them, they were dismantling them. It was psychological, surgical, efficient. Entire cities fell without a single human being seen. One by one, the aliens turned on each other, accusing their own commanders of betrayal. The paranoia grew so thick that executions became common. High-ranking officials purging their own ranks, convinced that only sabotage could explain their failures. And yet, it wasn't sabotage. It was us. The aliens had ruled over lesser species for centuries. They had dominated the weak, crushed resistance and enforced their will with overwhelming force. They thought they understood cruelty. They had no idea what true terror looked like until they faced the ones Earth had locked away. One by one, their leaders fell. Some were assassinated. Others were dragged from their fortresses in the dead of night. A few were left alive. Shattered, broken, their minds turned to nothing but raw, primal fear. They would never lead again. And then came the final blow. The prisoners had done their job. The alien worlds were in chaos, their armies reduced to terrified fragments of what they once were. But humanity wasn't done. The fleets arrived next, not to conquer, not to negotiate, to make sure they remembered. One by one, the planets that had ordered the execution of our medics burned. Cities were reduced to rubble, their grand monuments erased from existence. The aliens who had begged for our aid, who had betrayed our kindness, now screamed for mercy. But mercy had died the day they slaughtered our healers. We left them broken. Not extinct, but ruined. Their empire collapsed into warring factions, their people too afraid to speak our name. They would never rise again. And as the last human warship departed their shattered homeworld, a single message was broadcast across the stars to every species watching, every civilization that had once doubted what humanity was capable of. Never again. The galaxy fell silent. In the wake of humanity's vengeance, no species dared to speak our name. The aliens had believed us to be dangerous before, but now they saw the truth. We were not just another civilization expanding into the stars. We were something else entirely, something that did not forgive, did not forget, and did not tolerate betrayal. The Galactic Council met in emergency session, their members panicked, their voices hushed. They debated behind closed doors, trying to decide what to do. Some called for sanctions, for diplomatic isolation. Others whispered of preemptive strikes. of containing humanity before we became a true threat. But no one dared to act, because they had seen what we had done to the ones who had crossed us, and deep down, they all knew, if they moved against Earth, we would do it again. On the alien worlds we had broken, the survivors struggled to rebuild. They tried to rewrite history, to paint themselves as victims. But the truth was carved into the ruins of their cities, written in the ashes of their fallen empires. And on Earth, we went back to our lives. The war criminals who had been unleashed were never mentioned in official records. Their names remained forgotten, their existence denied. Those who had survived returned to the places humanity had once locked them away, not as prisoners, but as reminders. The galaxy thought we had unleashed monsters. They were wrong. The real monsters had been watching from the beginning. They had sat in their offices, in their war rooms, in their high towers, and made the decision that changed everything. They had known exactly what they were doing. Because humanity had never forgotten its own history. We had seen what happened when good people did nothing. We had learned the lessons of weakness, of trust betrayed, of peace mistaken for submission. We had once promised ourselves that we would be better, and we were, until the day they attacked our medics. That was the day we reminded the galaxy of the one truth they had all chosen to ignore. Humanity is kind until it isn't. The years that followed were eerily quiet. Humanity did not expand its borders. We did not launch new wars or claim new territories. Our fleets patrolled only our own systems. Our soldiers remained stationed on our own worlds. And yet, the galaxy remained afraid. It wasn't what we did that terrified them. It was what we didn't do. Empires rose and fell, conflicts erupted between species, rebellions sparked across distant worlds. But Earth never intervened. We did not take sides. We did not offer aid. We simply watched. For the first time in recorded history, the balance of power had shifted, not because of war, not because of conquest, but because of fear. The races that had once dismissed us as primitive brutes now treated us with reverence and caution. The Galactic Council avoided our anger at all costs. Trade agreements became lopsided in our favor. Diplomatic disputes always ended with humanity getting what it wanted. And yet, we asked for nothing. That was what unsettled them the most. The galaxy had seen conquerors before. They had seen tyrants and warmongers, species that burned across the stars, taking whatever they could. But we weren't like that. We didn't demand tribute or enslave weaker races. We just existed. And that was enough. The broken species that had betrayed us were left to their suffering. No reparations, no treaties, no second chances. They were ignored, left to rot in the ruins of their once great civilizations. A new generation of their kind grew up under the weight of what had happened. To them, humanity was not a people. We were a force, a storm that had swept through their worlds and left them shattered. And when their children asked why their cities lay in ruins, why their elders spoke in hushed tones whenever Earth was mentioned, why their history books skipped over the darkest years of their existence, the only answer they ever received was this: because we made the mistake of thinking humanity was like us. They would never make that mistake again. And neither would anyone else. Despite the silence, despite the fear that settled across the stars, whispers began to spread. There were those who questioned the legends surrounding humanity. The younger races, ones who had never seen the wrath of Earth firsthand, began to doubt the stories. They were born into a galaxy that had already been reshaped by humanity's vengeance, but they had never witnessed it themselves. How dangerous can they really be? They asked in secret meetings, in encrypted transmissions passed between rebellious factions. Some began to argue that humanity had been exaggerated, that the destruction of an empire was the result of internal weakness, not Earth's retaliation. And then there were the truly foolish ones, the leaders of new coalitions, the warlords of rising factions. They saw Earth's lack of expansion as a sign of hesitation, of weakness. They wanted to test us. The first was a minor warlord from the fringes of space. His fleet, composed of stolen ships and desperate mercenaries, raided a Terran outpost. It was a small station, nothing of strategic importance. He wanted to provoke a response, to see if the myths were real. Earth's response was minimal at first. A single ship arrived in his sector. Just one. No fleet. No armies. The warlord mocked it. He broadcasted messages of defiance, demanding Earth send its so-called monsters if we truly wished to make an example of him. Then the transmissions stopped. Days passed, and his forces waited for word from their leader. None came. So they sent scouts to investigate. What they found shattered them. His flagship was still there, untouched. No battle damage, no sign of struggle. The only thing that had changed was the crew. They were all dead, every single one. Not from battle, not from explosions or gunfire. They had been executed one by one, with surgical precision. No alarms had been triggered. No distress signals had been sent. The warlord himself was found in his own command chair, eyes wide in terror, a message carved into his forehead with inhuman patience. Never again. His faction collapsed overnight. His followers disbanded, scattering across the stars, whispering warnings to anyone who would listen. The galaxy had forgotten. Humanity had simply reminded them. And so, the silence continued. Earth never spoke of what happened. We never took credit. But we didn't need to. The message had been sent, and the lesson had been learned, again. The lesson should have been enough. The galaxy should have remembered. But arrogance is a stubborn disease, and some species are slow to learn. It took a few centuries, but eventually, another faction decided to test us. They were smarter this time. They didn't send a fleet. They didn't attack an outpost. They sent spies. They infiltrated human colonies, moving quietly through our cities, gathering intelligence. They studied our military movements, our technologies, our people. For years, they hid among us, learning, waiting. And then, they made their move. A Terran research facility on the outskirts of the Sol system went dark. No distress signals, no emergency broadcasts, just silence. When Earth's response teams arrived, they found only one thing: a single scientist left alive. She was tied to a chair in the center of the ruined facility. The rest of her team was gone. No bodies, no evidence, just gone. Carved into the walls around her was a message written in human blood. We are not afraid of you. Humanity didn't respond immediately. We let them think they had won. Let them believe they had struck a nerve. We waited. And then, without warning, every intelligence network across the galaxy collapsed overnight. Government records were erased. Security systems were breached. Communications between entire factions failed simultaneously. No one knew how. No one knew when it had started. And then the real terror began. The infiltrators, the ones who had studied us, who had walked among us, began to disappear. One by one, they vanished. Some were found later, left in public places, their bodies broken beyond recognition. Others were never found at all. The faction responsible panicked. They tried to secure their borders, mobilize their forces. But it was already too late. Entire command structures collapsed as leaders were found dead in their own bunkers. Their ships drifted, empty, their crews missing. Their colonies reported strange movements in the night, figures seen in the shadows, whispers in the darkness. The final blow came when their High Chancellor woke to find himself in his own war room, surrounded by his dead guards. He was alive, for the moment. A human was sitting across from him, cleaning a blade with deliberate slowness. No one knew who the human was. No name, no rank, no insignia. Just a voice that spoke in calm, measured words. "We are not afraid of you either." The next morning, the faction officially surrendered. No terms, no negotiations. They simply gave up, disbanded their government, abandoned their weapons, and scattered across the galaxy, vowing never to cross Earth again. There was no official record of what happened to their leaders, but the message was clear. Humanity did not forgive, humanity did not forget, and above all else, humanity did not tolerate slow learners, and so the galaxy remained in check. Not because of laws, not because of treaties, but because of fear. Not fear of war, fear of what would happen if humanity ever truly lost its patience. Generations passed, and the stories became myths. The younger races whispered about Earth in secret, telling each other tales of the monsters in human skin, the warriors who fought like ghosts, the punishments that came swift and silent. Some doubted the truth, until they met the survivors. The broken remnants of the factions who had dared to test us never recovered. Their people still existed, but they had no future. They wandered the galaxy as refugees, cursed by their own ancestors' mistakes, and they all had the same warning. Do not provoke them, do not challenge them, do not give them a reason. For centuries, the galaxy obeyed. Until one day, a new empire arose. They were young, reckless, bold, arrogant in the way all rising powers are. They expanded quickly, claiming worlds, forging alliances, pushing into uncharted space. And eventually, inevitably, they found humanity. At first, they respected us. They approached carefully, seeking trade, studying our history with wary curiosity. But as their influence grew, so did their ambition. They saw Earth's silence as complacency. They mistook our lack of expansion for stagnation, and, just as before, they whispered among themselves, "How dangerous can they really be?" The cycle was beginning again. They started small, testing our borders, probing our defenses. They sent ambassadors laced with subtle threats, hints of demands. Earth gave them nothing. And then they made their mistake. It wasn't an attack. It wasn't an invasion. It was a simple statement, spoken by their leader in a moment of arrogance, broadcast across the stars. Humanity is no longer the power it once was. It is time they accepted their place. The silence that followed was suffocating. The galaxy held its breath. The old survivors of past mistakes paled in horror, whispering desperate prayers that Earth would let this one slide. But deep down, they already knew. Humanity does not forget. Humanity does not forgive. And now, once again, humanity had been given a reason. Somewhere, in a place no one dared speak of, doors that had long remained sealed were opening. The monsters were being awakened, and the galaxy would soon remember the oldest lesson of all. Never provoke. Earth